जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय द्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णकरुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोस्तुते तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। All glories to Lord Chaitanya, all glories to Nityananda, and all glories to all the associates of Lord Chaitanya. We are discussing the 17th chapter of the Adi Lila, the concluding chapter of the Adi Lila, the pastimes in the Lord's youth, which eventually lead the Lord's taking sannyas. 24 years of the Lord's manifest pastimes. We discussed in a considerable detail the pastimes of the Lord delivering Chandkasi, how the Lord was firm in the face of opposition, how he organized and displayed the strength in unity, and how he gave a message. Even though he was not violent, the whole gathering of people demonstrated such a strength that it made Chand Kazi and his followers very much worried. So, unity is ultimately strength. So, even as devotees, it's very important. Prabhupada would again and again give this lesson. It's so important to be together, to overlook our petty, small differences and focus on the greater good. So, we are continuing the pastimes. The next pastime, which is mentioned by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, is that one day when Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, they were dancing in Kirtan in the house of Srivas Thakur. We discussed how Srivas Thakur's home was their playground for Kirtan. We also discussed how for one year throughout the night, Mahaprabhu and his associates would do Kirtan there. But regularly they would gather there. Srivas Thakur and his wife Malini, they were very, very, very devoted. They were all very elderly. They had a very affectionate attitude, almost like a Vatsalya mood towards Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. So, a very interesting pastime is mentioned that once, when the kirtan was going on in the home of in the home of Srivas Thakur, Srivas Thakur had a young son, and because of a disease, that son passed away in the house of Srivas Thakur as the kirtan was going on. Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda is dancing. Can you imagine? I mean, Srivas Thakur was also part of the Kirtan. As the Kirtan was going on, the son passes away. And not many details are mentioned here, but I'll mention a few that Srivas Thakur's wife, Malini, she was very, very distraught, like any mother would be, and she was crying and she was wailing and. So this matter was brought to the attention of Srivas Thakur. And everybody thought Srivas Thakur will be so upset and so disturbed. But Srivas Thakur quickly excused himself from the Kirtan, quietly came into the house, not in the least bit disturbed, and told his family members, including his wife, please don't cry loudly. Because if you cry loudly, it will disturb the Kirtan pleasure of Lord Chaitanya. I don't want to create any disturbance. So yeah, you can cry, but the sound should not come outside. Can you imagine? His son has just died. And he came back in to the Kirtan. And of course, the family members also, because they were also very, very devoted. They were trying, but of course, they were overwhelmed. He wasn't. He was so fixed in his devotion. He was so fixed in his surrender to Lord Chaitanya. He was not the least bit affected visibly. He came back in the Kirtan, he continued, and Lord Chaitanya asked Srivas Thakur, is everything okay? And Srivas Thakur told Lord Chaitanya, yes, oh Lord, when you are here personally, what inauspicious thing can possibly happen? So the Lord said, okay. And they were continuing Kirtan, and of course the Lord was feeling, of course this is the Lila, the Lord always knows, but the Lord felt that something is not right. And then some devotees came and told the Lord that, such and such a thing has happened. That actually Srivas Thakur has just lost his son. And the Lord was, very taken aback. The Lord immediately stopped the Kirtan. Now, there are many smaller details. I will not go into that. Pastimes are covered in greater detail elsewhere. So, in the conversation that Lord Chaitanya had with Srivas Thakur, you could see that Srivas Thakur was so firmly fixed that, oh Lord, actually nothing inauspicious has happened. But your son died. No, but he died when you are doing Kirtan. What can be more auspicious for my son? That he passed away hearing your Kirtan, that you and Nityananda and all the other devotees are dancing in Kirtan. What can be more auspicious than this? How can I say something inauspicious is that? Supreme fortune. So when the Lord saw this very strong faith of Srivas Thakur, he was so impressed. And he said, bring the body of the boy to me. So Lord Chaitanya, the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, he commanded the boy who had already departed. He said, you rise up. Can't you see your parents are crying? Your father and mother are crying. Get up. Why you left? Get up. So instantly, the soul of Srivas Thakur's son re-entered into his body and he got up. Became alive. And he offered his obeisances to Lord Chaitanya and started offering prayers. And he said, what? And Lord Chaitanya started telling him, why you left? What is this? You're causing distress to your parents, this, that. So the son of Srivas, he said, oh Lord, Supreme Personality of God, everything is happening by your will only. I had a very special fortune of being in this family for this allotted time. And I have been so fortunate to be here. Now my allotted time is over. Now, according to your will, I'm supposed to go elsewhere. So this is everything wonderful happening all by your desire. So everybody was astonished, and this was happening in public in the front of everybody. So all those who were crying and lamenting, especially the other relatives of Srivas Thakur, they saw the son come back to life speaking like this. Then they were convinced Sometimes philosophically we are not convinced, right? We hear, oh, everything has happened. Oh, even though this devotee died in an accident, it is auspicious because somehow auspicious in the sense, we don't say devotee died in an accident is auspicious. Not in that sense. Auspicious in the sense that devotees are very convinced that Krishna will do whatever is good for them, even though certain things may externally seem inauspicious by material considerations like this. Because what is the material consideration? One should have a long life, be successful, get married, have many children, be very this thing, and after having a long life full of all kinds of material achievements, success, and happiness, then one passes away peacefully. Oh, this is success. This means God has been kind. So devotees don't try to apply this kind of mundane logic. For the devotees of the Lord, following the Lord's plan for us and for the world. The Lord has a plan for us, and the Lord has a plan for the world, and the Lord has a plan for us within the plan for the world. So we don't try to act smart and try to tell God, what should be. Just like the actor doesn't tell the director that the plot and the scene should be like this. He just follows whatever is given, whatever the writer has written, the director is directing. The scene is to be enacted by the actors. So everyone was surprised, everyone was wonderstruck. And then this particular soul, that I'm achieving by your grace the best possible destination. So, oh Lord, I seek your permission. It is your desire that I should live. So I want to continue based on your desire to go to my next destination. And then he again laid down and he left his body. Very, very amazing episode. So there were some of these miracles which Lord Chaitanya did, bringing the son of Srivas back to life. The mango tree, we discussed about the mango tree. And there are many other pastimes where the Lord displayed miraculous powers. Of course, usually he would do this in private just to please his devotees, not as a feat for public curiosity or popularity. So in this way, the Lord reconfirmed to everybody who was there that all those who are his devotees and the family members of his devotees are all under his very special protection. Srivas Thakur's family was also very relieved that and convinced that nothing inauspicious had happened. Whatever had happened was perfect. Because somebody will say, oh, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda are dancing in your home and your son died. That means they are not God. Sometimes, we have our own half-baked understanding. That if God exists, these things cannot happen or that thing cannot happen. It's not like the devotee understands that by the Lord's will, anything can happen, everything can happen. The devotee accepts the Lord's supreme will in all situations. So Srivas Thakur was such an exemplary devotee. He had such strong faith in Lord Chaitanya. There are many other pastimes. I think they are covered later in Chaitanya Charitamrita. If not, I'll mention some other pastimes of Srivas Thakur's faith another day. Very, very strong faith. Lord Chaitanya, fully surrendered. Mahaprabhu was so pleased with this kind of surrender. And he was glorifying, even in this episode, he was glorifying Srivas Thakur like anything. And then Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda came to Srivas and Malini and said, please consider, your son has left, but please consider myself and Nitai as your children. So Gaur Nitai told them that we are also your children. So you have lost one son, but you treat us like. And Malini, the wife of Srivas Thakur, an elderly lady, she would just love to feed and serve Gaur Nitai like her own children. So they had a very, very special, sweet relationship. She was especially fond of Lord Nityananda. Then another episode is briefly mentioned by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. We had mentioned earlier, there was a time when uh, Lord Chaitanya gave the remnants of his prasad to a very young girl whose name was Narayani. Now, Narayani was actually a niece of Srivas Thakur. So, obviously, being a young girl growing up in that area, she was very fortunate to receive the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. It is said that Lord Chaitanya was especially merciful to her. In fact, once Lord Chaitanya personally gave, she was a very young child, and she was a very small girl, personally gave the remnants of the food that he had eaten. He gave it to her. Very rarely the Lord will do something. Actually gave the remnants of his food to her. And being influenced by the spiritual potency of those remnants. It is said later, when she grew up, she got married, eventually she bore a son. That son became the famous, great biographer of Lord Chaitanya's Lila, Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, the author of Chaitanya Bhagavad. So Chaitanya Bhagavad was written by the son of Narayani, who's the niece of Srivas Thakur. So Lord Chaitanya displayed his very special affection in this way to Narayani. So why this is mentioned is that Lord Chaitanya was not just merciful to Srivas and Malini, but he was merciful to all those connected with Srivas. And this is not just specific to Srivas, but this principle is true for many other devotees. In fact, if you remember a couple of sessions ago, we spoke about this lady, maid servant Dukhi. I'm not going to the details, but Prabhu, she says Dukhi. No, she cannot be Dukhi. Nobody in this place can be Dukhi. You have to be Sukhi. So I rename you Sukhi. And the Lord gave her pure love. So she was a servant in the house of Srivas. The principle is those who render service to pure devotees, those who are dear to the pure devotees, automatically, sometimes even without any special effort or sadhana on their part, come under the Lord's grace. They get the Lord's protection. They get the Lord's special mercy. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami mentions that there was one tailor of Srivas Thakur. He was a meat eater. So I'm assuming, even though it's not mentioned there, I'm assuming he perhaps was a Muslim. He was a tailor and he used to sew garments for Srivas Thakur. Even today in India, there are quite a few tailors who are from that community. And just because he was doing this service for Srivas Thakur, the Lord became so kind to him that it is said the Lord showed his own transcendental form, his spiritual form, to this tailor who was sewing the clothes of Srivas Thakur. Can you imagine? What is the value of being closely connected to a great soul? So when he saw the Lord's transcendent form, it's not described here what exactly was the form shown. Maybe showing him as Krishna or something. or Narayan. It's not mentioned here. But he said when he saw the form, he started dancing in ecstasy, screaming at the top of his voice, I have seen, I have seen. I have seen the form of God, I have seen the form of God. He was dancing in ecstasy. Mad out of love of God. And the Chaitanya Charitamrita says, thereafter he became a first-class Vaishnava. First-class Vaishnava means a pure devotee. Another very wonderful episode is mentioned about Srivas Thakur. Srivas Thakur was in great ecstasy and he asked Lord Chaitanya, Lord Chaitanya asked Srivas Thakur. Lord Chaitanya went into ecstasy. He told Srivas Thakur, please give me my flute. The Lord went into the mood of Gopinath, the Lord of the Gopis. He said, oh, give me my flute. Where is my flute? And Srivas Thakur, jokingly replied to Lord Chaitanya, oh, your flute has been stolen away by the Gopis. So when the Lord heard this, he heard a mention of the Gopis because he was suddenly in the mood of Krishna feeling separation from the Gopis. He said, oh, Srivas, go on talking, tell me more. Because suddenly he remembered, he had a deep remembrance of the love of the Gopis. And Srivas Thakur took that opportunity and started narrating the beautiful, transcendental, loving mellows of the pastimes of Vrindavan Dham, especially in connection with the Gopis. And as these sweet pastimes are being narrated by Srivas Thakur, God was feeling great happiness, great jubilation. See, this is something which really, really gives great pleasure to the Lord and his devotees. It's not just the devotees love to hear pastimes. The Lord also loves to hear his own katha. Because in that katha, not that the Lord is interested just in hearing about himself, but the Lord is happy to hear about his relationships with his devotees. There's one devotee, another story. I don't remember the name of that personality, unfortunately. If I recollect later, I will mention this. This particular devotee, a pure devotee, he would every day sit in front of the Lord and read the Srimad Bhagavad. It's one of the associates of Lord Chaitanya only, I think. Every day he would read. And he would read in a mood. His mood was, oh Lord, I am reading it for you. He was not doing it as a sadhana for himself. He was narrating the Bhagavatam to the Lord so the Lord can hear. And this is done in many places. I don't know which temple this was, whether this was in Puri, but this is done on a regular basis, even at Jagannath Puri, in front of Jagannath. Certain pastimes and certain songs like Gita Govinda and others are recited in front of Lord Jagannath every day, so that the Lord can relish listening to this beautiful Lilas of Vrindavan. The Lord is in that mood. So this devotee would every day recite. And the Lord would love to hear. Of course, nobody knew, because the Lord never really said anything like this. But the devotee very sincerely was doing this day in, day out for years and years. And I think at one point, I don't know whether he was sick or he became old or something like that. He gave that seva to either a son or another younger devotee. I don't remember that detail either, but doesn't matter. Give it to that. And that devotee started continuing to recite. When the Lord came in the dream of this devotee, And he said in the dream, "Oh, I'm missing you. Where are you? You have been reciting the Bhagavatam for so long. Now you're not coming." So, no, no, my lord, that devotee is, reciting, he's doing the seva. I said, yeah, it's okay, he's doing, that's fine. It's okay, but, to hear from your mouth what's so sweet. To hear from your mouth the recitation of these divine pastimes of mine, because you have that transcendental rasa. When you speak it with relish, with the realization of those mellows, it is very sweet for me to hear from you. So actually, it is my desire. I prefer you recite the Bhagavatam for me. The Lord loves to hear. So here also the Lord was wanting to hear from Srivas. Who's Srivas Thakur? Srivas Thakur is an incarnation of Narad Muni. Tell me, tell me. And he went on describing the beautiful pastimes. And the Lord was getting more and more blissful. And he was saying, speak on, speak on. Don't stop, go on. Like the sages of Naimisharanya would tell Sutta Goswami, Vayam tu na vitrapyama uttama shloka vikrame yachranvatam rasadnyanam swadu swadu padipadi. Everything you are saying is so tasty, so relishable. Don't stop, don't stop. And they are creating more and more questions and things just so that the class doesn't stop. And they are not looking at their watches, lunchtime, dinner time, breakfast time. Go on, don't stop. And Srivas Thakur, also with great enthusiasm, continued to describe the beautiful pastimes of Vrindavan, the sweet pastimes in greater and greater vividness. Then Srivas Thakur, to excite the Lord and make him relish that mood even more, he started describing how when Krishna played his flute, how the gopis were so attracted by hearing the sound of Krishna's flute, and how they would get attracted to the forests of Vrindavan, and how the gopis would wander through the forests of Vrindavan. And very, very beautifully described forests of Vrindavan. He describes the scene in 6 seasons, because Krishna plays his flute regularly. The 6 seasons he describes how all this beautiful forest is manifested and how the gopis gather together. So when the gopis gather together, what they do? They discuss about Krishna, they chant his holy names. What the gopis do and what we as sadhakas are supposed to do is not very different. What is the difference? We are raw mango, they are ripe mangoes. Both are mangoes. The sadhaka devotee and pure devotee, both are mangoes. But we are raw. Raw means, even though we are mango, we are not yet sweet. Somebody bites us, we may be either sour or we may even be bitter. Because we are still raw. But once we become fully purified, we become ripe mangoes. So the sadhakas also discuss Harikatha and the pure devotees also discuss, but the pure devotees discuss with great relish and realization. And we sometimes discuss as sadhana. And the more we advance, the more we are able to relish. So he started describing all these pastimes. He started describing how the Lord and the gopis would drink honey, how the rasa dance happened, how the Lord and the gopis were swimming in the Yamuna, and so many other incidents. And the Lord was just listening and listening and listening. In the mood of Gopinath, he was, go on speaking, go on speaking. The Lord and Srivas Thakur described the Ras Lila in great, great detail. And the whole night through, Srivas Thakur continued to nourish this mood of Lord Chaitanya by narrating these beautiful pastimes. Actually, in Chaitanya Lila, this particular seva, there are a few devotees. Of course, in this particular episode, Srivas Thakur throughout the night narrated the beautiful pastimes. But there are a couple of devotees who especially assisted the Lord in this seva of narrating the Lord's pastimes so that the Lord can relish. So one personality is Gadadhar Pandit. Gadadhar Pandit is Radharani herself. every day Lord Chaitanya would go to Kota Gopinath temple and wanted to hear Bhagavatam from Gadadhar Pandit. Can you imagine Radha and Krishna are meeting in Gaur Lila and what they are discussing? Bhagavatam. Radharani is narrating Bhagavatam to Krishna and Krishna is listening. He would relish every day, just love. And Gadadhar Pandit would, when he would read Bhagavatam, he would cry and cry and cry so much that the pages would be just smudged. Because in those days, it was not printed books, they were handwritten with ink on palm leaves. So very sweet scene. Other great devotees are Swarup Damodar, especially Swarup Damodar. There are a few others, Ramananda at times, but Swarup Damodar in most of the Ante Lila of the Lord would nourish this mood of Lord Chaitanya greatly by, based on the Lord's mood, narrate beautiful, beautiful katha, do beautiful, beautiful kirtan. So all night long, Srivas Thakur was narrating this beautiful pastime. And finally, morning appeared when the Lord realized, oh, now time to go, everybody will wake up. So the Lord profusely thanked Srivas Thakur for this wonderful seva by tightly embracing him. So that's the award the devotee wants. The devotee is not, oh, the Lord is pleased, now I'll get some big money, now I'll get some big position. The devotee is happy if the Lord is satisfied. That is his greatest happiness. The devotee is not hankering for a reward other than the Lord's pleasure. And this is the definition of a pure devotee. Atmendriya prithivancha tar balikam, Krishnendriya prithivancha dhare premanam. Giving pleasure to Krishna and Krishna's senses is love. And when the devotee sees that Krishna is pleased, the devotee is thoroughly pleased. And the transcendental science, the science of devotion, is when Krishna is pleased, automatically the soul becomes fully satisfied and pleased because the soul is part and parcel of Krishna. So that's why actually the soul doesn't need to make a separate endeavor to become happy and satisfied. That is our philosophy. Then another episode is mentioned, which is the Lord performed a drama. Actually, the Lord and his devotees, one of the activities they would do other than Kirtan Katha was that they would do dramas together. So they would pick up one episode from the scriptures and different devotees, Lord Chaitanya, Nityananda, Gadadhar, Srivas, all these various devotees would assign different roles amongst themselves and they would enact certain pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, of the Lord, either Krishna Lila, Ram Lila, different pastimes from different Leelas. So one such episode, it is said, where they put together a drama was in the house of Chandrasekhar Acharya. Chandrasekhar Acharya is also a very great devotee. And in that particular drama enactment, Lord Chaitanya played the part of Rukmini Devi. Lord Chaitanya played the part of Rukmini. Now you may be wondering why Lord Chaitanya played the part of Rukmini Devi. Because in these dramas, there were no female actresses, because they are all male devotees who are doing this. So even in olden times, until maybe up to even 70, 80 or 100 years ago, most of the dramas, males themselves would dress up as females and play the part of female characters, especially in the Indian culture. So Lord Chaitanya was dressed like Rukmini Devi and he was playing the role. It is said in different dramas, the Lord would take different roles. Sometimes he took on the role of goddess Durga, sometimes the role of goddess Lakshmi, sometimes the role of Yogmaya. So in this way, the Lord very beautifully, along with his devotees, would perform various beautiful pastimes. And he would satisfy all his devotees and he would give all his devotees very profuse blessings. And they all really enjoyed. So it is said one day, this is another episode, small pastimes are mentioned. I was sharing whatever Krishnadas Kaviraj mentions. It says one day Lord Chaitanya, he was doing his kirtan, and after he completed his kirtan, his dancing kirtan, there was a lady, she was the wife of a Brahmin. She came there suddenly and she caught hold of the Lord's lotus feet. And it said she touched the Lord's feet and put the dust on her head. And again she was touching the Lord's feet and putting the hand on her head. And actually, far from being happy, actually Lord Chaitanya became very unhappy. And it is said, he became very unhappy and he walked away from that place. He went to the Ganges and he jumped into the Ganges. Why he jumped into the Ganges? Because he wanted to counteract the sinful activities of the woman. Lord Nityananda and Haridas Thakur, they ran after Lord Chaitanya, who jumped in, and they pulled him out and brought him out of the river. So the acharyas say that the lesson that the Lord wanted to give is that by his example, he wanted to teach us that a devotee should be careful to not allow people in general to touch their feet. Now the Shastras say that if you allow somebody to touch your feet, then that person transfers a part of their sinful reactions to you when they touch your feet. So based on that principle, and it seemed that in this case, this particular lady wasn't particularly a devotee. Much is mentioned, but the Lord said that, oh, I have accepted her sinful reactions, and it is not good for us because we may be affected. Of course, the Lord is not affected, but he's setting the example. It is not good for us to accept the sinful reactions of people in general, especially those who are not purified. Because if they are not purified, if they are not Vaishnavas of high caliber, they are transferring their karma. We have to then digest that karma. So he says that devotees should be very careful, especially those who are spiritual masters, spiritual teachers, should be careful to not allow others to touch their feet. And Lord Chaitanya also followed that principle. And other acharyas, even Prabhupada and other, also generally follow that principle. The great devotees may sometimes allow their own disciples and intimate associates to that privilege of touching the feet, because they are purified and they are well established in devotions. In that sense, there is no danger of being infected. But other than that, we should be careful. So this is a lesson for all of us. We are all sadhakas. Sometimes, thinking of us as devotees, others may come and with a good heart, not that necessarily they have a bad intention. With a good heart they may do, but this is the risk that we expose ourselves to if we are not careful. Of course, they are purified. So they are purified and they are benefited, but we are not benefited. So we must be very careful. So that's another lesson. So it is said when this particular pastime happened, the Lord jumped into the river, then he was rescued by Haridas Thakur and Lord Nityananda. It is said that particular night, the Lord stayed at the home of a devotee by the name of Vijay Acharya, and the next day morning, along with all the devotees who were there, the Lord came back home. Now, another one very interesting pastime is mentioned. This is almost the culminating pastime of the Adi Lila. So please listen to this pastime very carefully. This is practically the last pastime before Adi Lila is summarized. So we're almost towards the end of the 17th chapter. So as we have discussed that, Lord Chaitanya being Krishna in the mood of Srimati Radharani, which means he's in the mood of the gopis. Radharani is the topmost of all the gopis. One day the Lord, the ecstasy of the gopis, he was sitting in his own home and he was feeling great separation from the gopis. That time he was in the mood of Krishna, but he was feeling separation from the gopis. And with great separation, he was, with feelings of great separation, Lord Chaitanya was calling out, Gopi, Gopi. So while he was calling out like that in a mood of great separation, one of his students, the Lord had many, many students. Students means not spiritual disciples, but students of his school. Because the Lord, as Nimai Pandit, would teach grammar, would teach Alankar, Alankar being uh, figures of speech. The Lord would teach all these subjects to his students. So one student, he saw Lord Chaitanya in this very depressed mood, calling out Gopi, Gopi. And not all students of the Lord were particularly devotees, and some of them being from caste Brahman families, were not devotees, and they couldn't actually understand and appreciate the Lord and his mood, especially these kind of moods that the Lord would go into. Even earlier, when the Lord would teach, he would so many times go into start teaching only by connecting everything with Krishna and speaking about Krishna. While some of the students would appreciate, others would get very irritated. Not everybody would be happy. But of course, the Lord didn't bother. He continued. And if somebody was not happy, he would just chastise them. So if you don't like, you can go elsewhere. But he was such a good teacher that, his students would be very reluctant to leave. So this particular student who was passing by, he saw the Lord in his home, chanting Gopi, Gopi in great feelings of separation. He came to the Lord. He thought, what is this? My teacher is doing something funny. Huh? So he had the audacity that he came to Lord Chaitanya, and because he totally couldn't understand how the Lord, this mood of Krishna, of the separation with the gopis, was chanting the names of gopis, he came to the Lord and said, why are you chanting the names of Gopi, Gopi? Instead, you should chant the name of Krishna. What is this? What punya you will get by chanting the name of Gopi? So this is known as the foolish student. The foolish student who doesn't actually understand the subject, they try to instruct their teacher on the subject where the teacher is PhD. They are still kindergarten students. They have not even understood the basics. But based on the little half-baked knowledge, they try to instruct and evaluate the teacher. The Lord was in so much of a mood of separation that when this particular student spoke like this, actually the Lord got angry. Angry because he was in that very intense mood of separation. And the Lord actually, when this boy said, chant the name of Krishna, why are you chanting the name of gopis? He started telling the boy things which were actually critical of Krishna. Now, this is very interesting. Why he said like that is because he was feeling the mood of separation which Radharani and the gopis were feeling when Krishna had gone to Mathura, left Vrindavan and gone to Mathura. And at those times, gopis and Radharani would rebuke Krishna in various ways. Oh, Krishna left us, he's like this, he doesn't care about us, he doesn't remember us, he got attracted to all these beautiful girls in the city, he has forgotten us, all these simple village girls, and so many things. The gopis would say. Of course, externally it seemed like criticism, but they were all cries of loving separation that the gopis had. But externally, they sound as criticism of Krishna. And when Lord Chaitanya is speaking like this, and he said, you chant the name of Krishna, oh, Krishna is like this. He left us and went away. He's ungrateful. He's this, he's that. It's not mentioned here what exactly he said. But these are some of the things which the gopis would say. So I'm assuming it must be something like this. And not only the Lord started speaking like this about Krishna, but being disturbed by the student who was taking Krishna's side and disturbing his mood, became so angry that he picked up a stick and he rose to strike the student. You're disturbing me, get lost. And the student, he came here trying to advise, and suddenly, from his perspective, the student's perspective, the teacher is doing something erratic. And on top of that, now he's jumping to beat me with a stick. He became so fearful, he ran away from there. And he was running, and the Lord Chaitanya was following him with a stick. And the other devotees who were nearby, they saw, the Lord is in this mood. They somehow checked the Lord and held the Lord. So the student ran away. The Lord didn't strike him, but he was chasing him with that stick. Probably some small twig or something like that. The student was terrified. He ran away, and when he ran away, he came across another assembly of students from their school. So this Brahmana student, he went to this place where many others were. They said thousands of students were studying together. And he told them, what happened just now? I was there. Our teacher Nimai Pandit, who does he think he is? What he was doing? He was doing this. And I told him, why you are chanting? Scriptures don't say chant name of Gopi. No punya is available by chanting name of Gopi. You should chant name of Krishna. And in this way, he started criticizing Lord Chaitanya. And when the other students heard, students amongst themselves, they enjoy when the teacher is criticized. They all like to gossip about the teacher. This is something which is, I think all of us have been seeing since our school, college days. So these are especially those students who were not very spiritually conscious, nor did they appreciate the Lord from a spiritual perspective. These students became angry. Really? He did like this? This Nimai Pandit, he has spoiled the whole country. And he wants to hit a Brahman, person who is a Brahman by caste. Has he no fear of violating dharmic principles? If he dares to do this and hit you or hit any of us again, he will retaliate and we will hit him back. What does he think of himself? Do you think he is so great that he can do anything? So this kind of angry mood, all these students went in. Obviously, when they went in this kind of an angry, critical mood, and the mood criticizing a teacher, who's the teacher? The teacher is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Obviously, their intelligence became contaminated. It is said, even though they were so learned scholars, it is said because of this offense of criticizing the Lord, the real essence of the knowledge that was taught to them did not manifest in their heart. This is a very important principle. Spiritual knowledge will remain theoretical until the essence of that knowledge becomes manifest. That essence of knowledge becomes manifest when we receive the causeless blessings of Guru and Krishna. Yasya deve para bhakti yatha deve tatha gurau tasyate kathite hi artha prakashante hi mahatmanah. He who has implicit faith in Guru and Krishna, yatha deve tatha guru. To such a person, the innermost imports of the Vedic knowledge, the essence of it, becomes revealed within their heart. Now we can discuss on this so much. There are so many beautiful points. I will not go into that in the interest of time, because I want to complete the chapter today. Please read. Prabhupada has given many beautiful quotes and verses from various scriptures explaining this particular principle. But the key point is that If a person simply knows scripture, it doesn't make him learned. One has to realize the import of scriptures. The jnana has to transform into vijnana. And that vijnana comes when one actually understands the real conclusion of all the knowledge which is learned. And the real conclusion is to engage in pure devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is real Vijnana. That is real essence. And when one actually understands that essence, one actually then takes to the 9 processes of devotional service with great sincerity and determination. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnoho Smaranam Pada Sevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam. So when a person actually understands, not just theoretically understands, because even demons would study the Vedas, isn't it? Ravana was very learned in the Vedas. But did he actually understand the essence of the Vedas? No. Because the essence of the Vedas is to surrender and love the Supreme Personality of Godhead and serve him. Here, the Supreme Personality of Godhead spouse he is capturing and he is fighting against him. So what has he understood? So when one becomes offensive to the Lord or the spiritual master or the devotees, then the essence of the scriptures will never be manifested in the heart. It takes many, many lifetimes. That's why the scriptures say, Gita, Krishna says, Bahunam janmanamante jnanamam prapatate vasudeva sarvamiti samahatmas. So many, many lifetimes of cultivating knowledge. When one finally actually understands the essence of knowledge, one understands, oh, the culmination is to surrender unto Krishna, the Supreme Personality of God, because he is the source of everything. Vasudeva sarvamiti. Such a person becomes a Mahatma. So all these students, because of their critical attitude towards the Lord, their intelligence became spoiled. And because of these offenses, their pride, their arrogance, that rather than trying to understand their teacher, they started becoming critical. And they were so proud, they did not become submissive to their guru. Not only did they not become submissive, but when they heard about this episode, they started spreading the gossip everywhere. And they would laugh about Lord Chaitanya and talk to each other. Ha ha ha. And this way they would criticize. So all this was going on, and Lord Chaitanya, of course, being omniscient, being the Lord, he knows what is going on. So the Lord understood how these students were becoming degraded, how they were actually endangering their own spiritual life by becoming so offensive. The Lord started thinking and contemplating, this is not a very good situation. This is a very dangerous situation. I need to do something to help the situation, because if these people, even after learning all the scriptures, they become blasphemers, then they are going to be lost. They will not be able to understand anything. And especially if they become offensive to me, they will not accept what I have come to give. I have come to give everyone pure devotional service. But because of their offenses, they will not be able to receive it, even though I am willing to give. So this is a problem for my mission. I have come with the mission to give to everybody pure Krishna Prem. But if they are offensive, even though I want to give, they cannot receive it. So what to do? I have to help the situation. So how can I now fix the situation? How can they be benefited? See, the Lord was not angry because they are criticizing him. The Lord was more concerned about their welfare. How they are endangering themselves by being critical. So the pure devotee, the guru, the advanced devotees, they are not so concerned about personal criticism per se for themselves, because they are not interested in the glory for themselves. But yet at times they will be careful to not allow their disciples to commit such offenses that the disciples themselves put themselves at great spiritual risk. That is why devotees especially leaders, spiritual teachers, spiritual masters, they are generally careful in such a way that others do not become offensive, because that ultimately harms their own spiritual life. And that is one of the reasons the scripture said, do not preach to those who are faithless, because when you preach to faithless people, they will retort by saying something offensive, and that offensive comment will hurt them more than what you are trying to help them. So one must know what to speak where. Of course, certain generic things one can speak about the body, about the soul, but about Krishna and Krishna's confidential pastime, what the glories of the holy name, these things are not for those who are faithless. These are subject matters only for devotees to contemplate and so devotees are generally careful. Preachers have to be very careful. Keep these points in mind. So the Lord was very, very concerned that how I'm going to deliver all these fallen souls. There is one way. They are committing so many offenses. The only way they can be delivered from these offenses is they offer obeisances to me. So it is said in the scriptures, if you have offended somebody, if you offer sincerely obeisances to them, then you will become free from the offenses. But how will they offer obeisances to me? They are becoming critical of me, and they are even willing to strike me back. So I have to do something in such a way that all these students and all other people who are critical of me, who are actually making my mission difficult. My mission is to give Krishna Prem, but these people cannot accept because of their offenses. So the only way I think that they will offer obeisances to me is if they see me as a sannyasi. Because the culture in the Vedic society at that time is that if you see a sannyasi, no choice, everybody will immediately offer obeisances. So the Lord was thinking that this is the only way the world can be saved. I was trying to preach in such a way that without having to do anything like this, they will all become devotees, but it looks like it's not working. I'm trying to do something where it seemed to have opposite effect. So there is no choice. To give them Krishna Prem, I have to take sannyas. I know if I take sannyas, it will cause so much pain to my near and dear associates. My mother, I have to give up my loving wife, Vishnu Priya Devi. I have to give up my loving mother. I have to live in such a way that my near and dear associates will feel so pained to see the austerities I will undergo. I have no choice. I have to do this. So after thinking very, very deeply and reflecting on this deeply, the Lord came to this very firm conclusion. Of course, immediately the Lord continued to stay in his home. He didn't share this with anybody. Meanwhile, it is said a great sannyasi was also a devotee, but he was a sannyasi in the Shankara Sampradaya, an Ekadandi sannyasi. His name was Keshava Bharati. So this Keshava Bharati Maharaj came to the town of Nadia. So when he came, the Lord met him, the Lord offered him his respects and he invited him to his home and he fed him as a great devotee. And he was quite senior in age to Lord Chaitanya also. So the Lord in his mind was thinking, oh, I want to take sannyas initiation from this Keshav Bharati. So after feeding him and serving him nicely, he told him that, oh, Keshav Bharati Maharaj, I want to submit in private a request of mine. And nobody else knew about this. It was a private conversation between Lord Chaitanya and Keshav Bharati Maharaj. He said that I want to take sannyas and I want you to give me sannyas. And Keshav Bharati Maharaj, he could understand that Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of God. He was also a devotee, even though he had taken, because in those days, the prominent known sannyas order was the Ekadandi sannyas under the Shankara Sampradaya. There was no other prominent sannyas school. That was considered the respected sannyas order. So Keshav Bharati Maharaj told Lord Chaitanya, oh Nimai Pandit, you are directly Narayan, you are the Supreme Lord. How can I give you sannyas? Please be merciful to me. You must deliver me from material bondage. But yes, it is true. If it is your instruction that I must do this seva for you, then I have no choice, because I am at the end of the day, your servant. So I am not independent, but this is far out, whatever you are asking me to do. So he was quite shocked, but still he conceded that, oh Lord, if that is what you want me to do, then I will fit into your plan. Like what I mentioned, right? God has assigned each of us some role to play in his plan. It will unfold at the right time. And then not much is described here now in this chapter, but briefly, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, as he wraps up the Adi Lila, mentions that in due course, of course, Keshav Bharati, after this episode, he went back to his village. His village is known as a place known as Katwa, also known as Kantakanagar. So he went back to Katwa, and it is said in due course, Lord Chaitanya one day, very quietly, he left his home in the middle of the night, leaving behind his mother and his very devoted wife. And for the sake of welfare of all the living entities, the Lord took sannyas at Katwa. And Keshav Bharati Maharaj had arranged all what was needed. Nityanand Prabhu, Chandrasekhar Acharya, and Mukunda Datta, these three devotees were personally there from the Lord's close associates who actually were actively there as the Lord took sannyas. This episode is described in great detail elsewhere, but we will not go into that. Today it's not discussed in great detail here, but I just wanted to mention. So having briefly mentioned this about the Lord taking sannyas, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says that I have summarized the key incidents of the Adi Lila. He also again reminds the listeners that, the readers, the listeners, that Vrindavan Das Thakur, the son of Narayani Devi, has described in great detail in Chaitanya Bhagavat all these things. So I have avoided being too elaborate. And in that way, he concludes the Adi Lila. The last 30-40 verses of this particular chapter, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is kind of summarizing the Adi Lila. So in summary, he says, and I'll just take 2-3 more minutes and we'll conclude. In summary, he says that, oh listeners, please understand, the self-same Krishna, the son of Mother Yashoda, has now become the son of Mother Sachi. He has come to taste these 4 mellows. So there are 5 mellows, there are 5 rasas, right? Shanta, Dasya, Sakhya, Vatsalya and Madhurya. Out of these 5, Vrindavan, 4 are manifested. Other than Shanta, the other 4 are manifested. So to taste these 4 mellows, he comes. And especially to taste the loving mellow of Srimati Radharani. He has come as Lord Chaitanya. So he's again summarizing so that we don't lose track of what position of this Lord Chaitanya is. So a lot of wonderful things he has described here. I suggest that you read. I think it is getting late, so I don't want to go, because if I go into this topic and this conversation, it will probably take another 15-20 minutes. Otherwise, I cannot do. Cannot do justice. This topic is sweet, but it is. Actually, we can discuss this in the next class also. We can discuss this in the next class rather than just This is a bit interesting also. So the pastimes have concluded. We have discussed. Let's do that. We can have the next class where we can wind up this because there are 30-40 verses. So, there are some interesting points which I mentioned here philosophically. The summarization. So thank you very much. So what we will do is we will continue from verse 275 onwards in our next class. And it goes on from 275 to 336. So 50, 60 verses. Quite a bit. Let's do that in the next class. So thank you very much for patiently listening. It is 1008, very auspicious time. So I hereby conclude this narration. And we hope and pray, as always, that by our discussion and our hearing these pastimes, the Lord will be pleased. Because the truth is no matter what we do, don't do, at the end of the day, if our activities, if our attempts, if our sadhana, if our seva is not actually pleasing to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then it's actually a waste. It's actually a waste. Our real soul purpose of doing all that we are trying to do, all sadhana, all seva, simply with this one purpose of pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And of course, when we please the devotees, also ultimately the Supreme Lord is pleased. So devotees, aspiring devotees like us should never be forgetful of this most important of all principles. That it is not so important to do big things or to impress the world or to become great, to become number one. No, Krishna is not impressed by number one or number two. Krishna is impressed with the genuine selfless devotion of our heart. That's all. Of course, if we are empowered to do wonderful, big, great things, we must do because we want to do the best for Krishna. So this is not to minimize efforts to serve the Lord in big ways. If we can do, we should do. But the point is, ultimately the question to ask at the end of the day is Krishna being pleased? And Krishna will be pleased only when we are doing sincerely for his pleasure. If we are doing it just to increase our own glories, if we are doing our seva, our sadhana to impress others, if we are doing it to show off amongst the association of devotees, so that we are great devotees, yeah, we still make some progress because bhakti will always give some results, but that kind of a sadhana is not really going to be pleasing to Krishna's heart. Even if our sadhana is imperfect, if it is done sincerely with a desire to serve Krishna, Krishna is more pleased. There's this beautiful pastime of Lord Chaitanya where when Lord Chaitanya went in his tour of South India, and we will be discussing this in Madhya Lila. I'm just giving you a quick glimpse as I'm concluding. There was this Brahmana who was sitting with Bhagavad Gita outside a temple in South India. He was holding the Bhagavad Gita, but he was holding the Bhagavad Gita upside down. And he was trying to read, and tears were coming from his eyes. And the Lord said that, because everybody who was passing by were laughing at him. He doesn't even know how to hold the Bhagavad Gita. The Lord was very impressed. God came to him and he said, why you are holding upside down and why are you crying? He said that, actually I'm uneducated. I'm unable to read. But my spiritual master instructed me that you should read the Bhagavad Gita every day. So I'm just holding and trying, but I don't know how to read, but I'm trying. So Mahaprabhu was so pleased. And he said, why are you crying? He said that whenever I hold the Bhagavad Gita, the image of Krishna, this Bhaktavatsal Krishna who became the driver for his devotee Arjun, comes in front of my eyes. And whenever I remember that form of the Lord, who is so Bhaktavatsal that he willingly became the servant of his devotee, I become so overwhelmed by the Lord's loving nature that I cannot but help cry. And so that is why I am shedding tears. So Lord Chaitanya told him that he became so pleased with that sincere devotion. He was not learned, but Lord became so pleased with that sincere devotion. Very genuine, very humble, very sincere. The Lord said that you have understood the Bhagavad Gita. Huh? Like what we discussed, right? The essence of the knowledge of Gita has come in your heart, even though you cannot read. So that is what happens when we please the Lord genuinely. The knowledge that we have learned, or sometimes even the knowledge we have not learned, comes manifest in our heart and becomes understood and realized. Atah Shri Krishna Namadina Bhaved Grahyam Indrehi Sevonmukhehi Jivadau Swayam Eva Spuratyadaha. When we start serving the Lord and pleasing Him with chanting and doing other forms of services, the knowledge becomes revealed in our hearts by the Lord's grace. And when the knowledge becomes revealed, everything becomes understood. What is read becomes understood. What has not been read also becomes understood. So our process is a process primarily of grace. Our process is a process of endeavoring sincerely to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His devotees. Because when the devotees are pleased, the Lord is also pleased. So that is something which we must never forget. And this is a principle which comes again and again and again. So I think we will do that. So any questions, any comments, anybody before we conclude?
Prabhuji, one quick question.
Yes.
Taking blessings, right? So we are not at a mature stage, but we always have the culture of taking blessings, right, Prabhuji? So a devotee taking blessings. Okay.
We can take blessings, but without permission, we should not touch the feet.
I mean, the person whom we are taking blessing, their feet.
Yes. Especially I'm talking within the community of devotees.
Okay, okay.
Unless we have their permission. Of course, see, for example, within our families, if children touch the feet of their parents,
Yeah.
that is okay. That's anyway, the parents will take the karma of the children. So whether they touch the feet or they don't touch the feet, it doesn't matter. So, or if the wife touches the feet. See, that's why it is mentioned, Prabhupada mentions, if the disciple touches the feet of the guru, he mentions this, but children touch the feet of the parents or the grandparents, or the wife touches the feet of the husband. In that, there is no consideration of prohibition. But in public, we are especially talking about in public, which means if you just randomly allow anybody to come and touch your feet, then you risk affecting yourself with karma. You understand? This will not typically happen. Of course, who will come and touch our feet unless we are seen in a position of spiritual seniority, spiritual leadership, or as spiritual teachers? Then only others, sometimes may come and touch, isn't it? Otherwise, in the office, nobody will come. Oh, Suraj Prabhu, come and touch your feet, or my feet, or anybody's feet for that matter.
Because any
Nobody's
children touch your feet, right, Prabhu? As a general culture. Children's.
Yes.
Like what I have cultivated is whoever seniors come to our house, we take the blessings. So in that case, if I go to someone's place, if they have the habit, those children will also take my blessing, right, Prabhu? So they will not know, right?
Yeah, so what we do in certain situations, Prabhupada said, if you cannot avoid in a situation like that, then, when somebody touches our feet, we should touch their head. So it is said in that way, we are not affected by the karma. Yeah. So that way one completes the circuit. He pass to you, you pass it back. Yeah. But But yeah. So this is an advice of generally to be, careful, and especially when somebody comes with a material desire, when somebody comes, and especially if they are sinful, then it becomes more problematic.
Good.
Hmm. But for those who are, Prabhupada says that those who are disciples, the Guru may allow them to touch their feet. Of course, not all Gurus may allow. Sometimes Gurus may also not be willing. Not even in ISKCON, not all Gurus allow their disciples to touch their feet for various reasons. It may not just be about karma. Sometimes devotees themselves, to follow the principles of humility, do not like or want others to treat them with great respect and touch their feet, and that is also normal. So whatever is the mood of our superiors, we must respect that.
Good.
So if we don't touch the feet, there are other ways to do it. We can just offer obeisances, or we can take dust from the place where the spiritual master has placed his foot. The dust is there. So once he removes the foot, you can touch the place where he has placed his foot, correct? Yeah, even though you may not touch the feet directly. So there are other ways to do this. So we should not embarrass or cause inconvenience, because if we displease the devotee against his wishes, then again the whole principle is again spoiled, right? You want to please the Lord, but you displease the devotee, and in that way displease the Lord. So what did you achieve? You're not going to get a blessing. A blessing cannot be squeezed. It's not that sinful people can tie up pure devotees and take their feet and put on their head and say, now I am fully purified. This is not some material technology.
Yeah.
So it's all a principle of pleasing by submitting yourself at the feet of a great soul. When the pure devotee blesses and accepts that submission, there is a transfer of grace. So these are very sacred principles. So even without physically touching, if we are submitting to the teachers and getting their heartfelt blessings, that also works. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Yes, but in general, I will say that, within our families, we should encourage a culture of the youngers taking blessings of the seniors. So that culture is very important culture. That's a part of our Vedic traditional culture. Like I said, in very close relationships, touching the feet is okay. Other places, even if we bend down, and offer respects to our teachers and superiors. Actually, it is quite obligatory. If we see our spiritual masters or spiritual teachers, to not offer pranam is an offense. It is an offense, which means you will be karmically implicated if you don't offer pranam. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go and touch their feet. So these are, some of these things are obligatory, especially in the presence of our superiors. So even if you meet your parents, it is, especially when you see them after some time, when you meet them, it is quite obligatory. You must offer them respects, touch their feet. If you don't offer proper respect to the parents, to the teachers, both material and spiritual teachers, of course, more important for spiritual teachers, but even for those who have taught us any subject, then it is a violation of principles. And again, as I said, offering respect doesn't always necessarily mean you physically touch the feet. It can also involve bowing down. Wherever possible to touch the feet in certain relationships, one can do. But that culture is very important, because grace always flows from higher level to lower level. when we take a lower level in front of those who are superior to us, their good wishes naturally flow. It's very natural for a blessing to come. And that is always beneficial. And especially so for great souls. Great souls do not have to put their hand on our head to bless us. If we can just invoke the grace of a goodwill in the heart of those who are of pure consciousness, that automatically creates a blessing. Just the good wishes, even without even saying it, of a devotee is so powerful, we cannot even imagine. Because those who are pure in heart, their wishes actually are like a benediction. Even their good wishes, they actually impact, and so do their bad wishes. That's why we should not offend. So great souls are like fire. If you handle fire wonderfully, you can cook wonderful items and do so many things. But if you are careless, you will burn yourself. Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Hari. So I think we will spend the next class. I think we'll wind up the Lila properly rather than do it a bit abruptly. And then we will move to Madhya Lila from the week after next. Okay. Thank you very much. What is the Gaur Purnima date? I'm just trying to. 5th?
7th March.
7th, okay, still some time. Okay. Okay, not very far. Yeah, so just make sure you all have this marked on your respective calendars. Anyway, we still have a few classes before that. So we will remind you. So thank you very much. Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita
Thank
ki
you, Prabhu.
jai. Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Gaura Bhakti. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thanks. I'll see you on Saturday. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.